this is part one of our sustainability series. This first one is really going to talk about, well, what do we think sustainability is, especially in public health, and then looking at different levels, specifically the strategic and operational sustainability that isn't usually discussed all the time. And then we're going to dive into one of our favorite strategic sustainability tools, and that's the PSAT, and kind of what it contains, how you can actually do it. And just giving you a heads up right now, it is free. So it's not like something you have to get any funding for or anything. You just need some time. It can be done by an individual all the way through a whole organization. So today we're really focusing again just to briefly talk about what you feel sustainability is and in public health, what we're talking about with levels. And the levels we're just going to mention because one of our webinar 3 is diving deeper into one of those too. And then we're going to talk about how to piece that get created, how was it validated, and there's 8 domains. So we're just going to introduce those very briefly so don't feel like you're getting heavy amount of information on it, but it is really informative to know if you want to take it or not. And then how the process works and how we've ran it with grantees and organizations, and then what's coming up next. So if you don't mind, I would love to hear any thoughts on what you feel is sustainability. It could be sustainability with a program, public health, life. I mean, just anything that you feel like. You can put it in the chat or you can come off mute and just tell us. I'm going to put Shannon on the spot and make sure she tells me what she feels sustainability is. But I would just love to kind of hear everyone's kind of take on it. And oops, as I switch. And then I'm going to look at I'm trying to find my chat again. Apologize.
I'll keep track of the chat for you, but
Thank you.
I always think of sustainability as things that can go on and work and maintain after you're gone, specifically to a different job or a different activity or something that they continue to go and work.
I like that. That's very helpful.
Anyone
Um,
else? What do you call
yeah.
sustainability?
All right. Okay, so we're just going to jump into this kind of broader term, and this is used more in public health, so it can be applied in different ways. But it's really looking at that ability, kind of what Shannon was saying, the ability of a system or program or organization to maintain its impact, really, to keep moving forward and helping people over time. And it can really adapt to anything that's changing in the conditions of external, internal, things like COVID. We saw a lot of work on things had to be changed and resources. And then it's a lot of times people think of sustainability of how to keep things going for community needs, but also need to remind yourselves that you need it also for your staff and people that you're working with. So we have 3 levels here of kind of things that people think about. The strategic level is that large one that kind of overwhelms you of like, how in the world am I going to keep this going? So that's that long term. You're thinking of funding, partnerships, policy. And we're going to dive deeper of like how you can kind of break that apart. And then the program sustainability is one that sneaks up on people that you're actually usually doing. A lot of times you do it through your evaluation. It can be our evaluation CPEG does for you, a grantee-led one. Also comes in the form of quarterly reporting. You're evaluating that program. How do you do it? And anytime you're evaluating your work, you're evaluating how to get it stronger. What are the things working? Keep leveraging off those things that are strengths, and you're moving those forward as your program sustainability piece. And then the last one is the one we're really going to dive into in webinar 3, and it's kind of going off with Shannon, is really making sure that if people leave or new people come, is that organizational stability happening? Do you have that internal infrastructure to really keep things going? And so the 2 that I really want to focus on clarifying is the strategic sustainability. It is that internal planning. It takes a lot of resources, and we want to make sure that it has a long-term impact. So there's a lot of planning. And the reason we're bringing this on the slide here is that we do love the PSAT because it breaks it down into easy digestible kind of components to it. not only assess your organization, but it also gives you things that actionable to do, and it helps you do that. But that's not the only tool. There are several that you can do. There's this, we've named them here, so you can look them up here too if you want to use any of them. But also anything that's implementation tool also use works really well too, and they're usually free. Like Reaim Prism also will, is available to really work with people to see their sustainability and how to strengthen their programs. And so that's the same thing as the Seaford does a similar process like that. But then there's really some other new ones that kind of do a combo of strategic and organizational, and that's like the dynamic sustainability framework is another one. And so then we're going to jump into, again, webinar 3, just kind of a sneak peek of looking at, well, what can we do with the internal systems, the workforce practice, the data protocols, the knowledge management. Some of the stuff you might be doing, now you're going to give yourself credit, like, hey, I'm already doing some really good organizational sustainability. And so just it makes you feel like, wow, these things also contribute to us keeping things going. And here are some of the main categories we think about for organizational sustainability. That workforce sustainable one and retention is really making sure your workforce is feeling there's like a career pathway. Do they feel like there's professional development? Do they have mentorship? This really can strengthen the organization and keep things going. Um, the two that we're really going to focus on in webinar 3 is the effective onboarding and the effective offboarding. And what we find is that we've been in this field, especially tobacco, is making sure that when you're offboarding, you're not losing any of that knowledge, operational knowledge, program knowledge, but also the tobacco kind of environment that's working. A lot of people that work in this field have such rich information, and you want to make sure that that gets carried over. And then when you're onboarding, you want to share that with the people and learn a lot. I was very fortunate. We had I had both Sarah Cooper, my boss, and Arnold Levinson, who were extremely knowledgeable when I onboarded in the tobacco industry, so in field, and so understood what was going on. And then you wouldn't think about it, but data protocols and file organization really is important because one, it's keeping where that knowledge is going. But you're also keeping the systems of how things are done, how your data is getting collected, how it's getting cleaned, how it's QA'd. If you have a process, that onboarding and offboarding is going to be a lot easier because you're going to have a system to it and you're really going to be able to keep things going. So that we're going to dive into little details of that in webinar 3, but now we're really going to jump into the Program Sustainability Assessment Tool, the PSAT. It was developed really at the Center of Public Health Systems and Social Work at Brown School and Washington University in St. Louis. So there is mainly 8 domains in this. It is a free tool. And what we want to really emphasize is it's really there to look at these sets of organizational contextual factors that are going and what can be strengthened and leveraged to really keep things going. And also see where the areas are that you can actually help and increase and they're having challenges. So we are going to dive into each of these. So you don't hear me rattling off. I'll go back to my notes. But I also wanted to kind of inform where this came from. So in 2008, there was a recession that happened, and a lot of the public health agencies, the state and local, were cut severely in their funding. And so CDC and Brown were looking at, well, why are some programs that got all of them got cut. Some were still working really well and succeeding, and some weren't. And they were really trying to figure out, well, what is the difference in this? And especially in the tobacco area. And so what they found is these 8 domains. There were all these different things that people were leveraging when their funding got cut, like partnerships, there were communication, there's program adaptations. So they developed these 8 from understanding the ones that were succeeding and the ones that weren't. And over time, they were able to come up with those domains and the assessment tool and then test it. And so in 2014, they did a large study where they tested the validity of this tool by doing 252 chronic disease and tobacco programs. It's a very large span study that they did. They did it from community, small public health programs to CDC's departments. And they did over almost 600 people doing this tool to really validate that it was working and effective in keeping sustainability. So now it is well over 10,000 plus PSATs of assessments have been done. The program, PSAT is for the program. They do have a clinical one, it's CSAT. So if you wanted to do that kind of version for something else, that is available too. It is done nationally and internationally, coming over 175 countries. It's growing. Mainly, it's been used in public health for 45% of it that they found. Some people probably haven't even, this is what they've actually been, know that is being used by. 20% is doing the social service, and then 12% was clinical care. And then you have about 23% in other areas, mainly in the education. So it's definitely widely accepted and widely used. And then one of the stories to just kind of give you a marker that is being really used was the South Dakota Department of Health and Tobacco Control. They decided during COVID, because it was a really hit impactful time, was a really good one to look and see what they could do for sustainability. And in July of 2020, they went through this assessment in the eight domains, being able to figure out what domain to focus on. And their one to find their sustainability was going to work on the communication domain. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it really helped leverage them into a different place of their sustainability work and make it through a lot of the hardships of what COVID caused and getting a movement in their tobacco work. So when we move into the domains, there are eight of them. And what I would like to show on these, I apologize, it might be slightly not entertaining to go through all of them, but it will help you to see if these are the domains you would want to be assessed with. So each of the domains have a first chunk, and this is the environmental support is one of the domains. It really will talk in this first part. Each of these slides will show you the assessment questions. There are 5 to each. They go on a scale from 1 to 7. And you can also not have to answer it. So if it doesn't apply, you don't have to answer that. It won't be calculated. And then on each of them, kind of just gave you some of the things that we could come up with on specific domain actions that could be taken if you picked this domain. Again, all domains don't have to be picked because it's like the lowest score, or the highest score. It's really uh, we'll talk about further, but it can be leveraging your strength. It can be the highest one and leveraging it even further, or it can be worked on the weaker one. And we can discuss that in a sec. So the environmental support is the first one to look at. These questions can be at the federal level, state level, also local level of that support system. It can look at also other institutions or community kind of work. It's really looking at champions who strongly support you at all those levels or a particular one. So you're looking for also champions who have the ability to help you get resources that not necessarily has to be funding. That could be connecting to a population or a way to get more mental health services within your sensation program, kind of things like that. So then there's leadership support within the larger organization or outside. So those are the questions that you'd be asked on this kind of thing. And if you pick this domain, you could think about looking at the conduct a stakeholder analysis. Who are the ones that are making the decisions that you need to get in front of? And then with that, you could also start developing asking and talking points to really help motivate and move that decision making forward and to help your program. And these are also used for reference slides, so we'll have them on the VAP, so you can go through them anytime. So I won't try to read everything, so that way you're not just listening to me do this, but also a reference to go and decide, is the PSAT something we should take? You can come back to these and go, yeah, maybe this is good. So the funding stability is in the domains because it makes sense. It is a part of keeping things going. And there's some questions that I like about this is not just asking about one particular element of your funding. It's asking also to look at the kind of the overall state economic climate or the federal climate, kind of pre-looking at what is it kind of going to look like in the future. So that helps you understand how to affect your funding. Also, your braided funding, or how is it stable, or is there flexible in the spending of the funding? Because some, some of the funding is strict, right? And some other ones you can actually work and do different parts of your program within it, like build out more of a data system or help with the communication part. So, and so it kind of gives you into also looking at policies that might affect future funding on the positive or the negative side. And so the kind of action plans on this is really learning how to work with those kind of dynamics that are happening in the climate and the policy range to be able to develop a funding plan that gives these safeguards and also have pre-talks of understanding what are our key parts of our infrastructure that we need to maintain and how much does it cost us to keep that going, and then where can we have um, the priority of what is not necessary or how to share different resources within a group. Now, partnership has been one of the key ones that we do constantly find when we worked with people on the PSAT for sustainability. A lot of times it's a really, in public health, we're always working on partnerships, but it really can be a place of leverage of sustainability because it can give you all these kind of assessment questions first to think about. We always like to think of a diverse, are we meeting that diverse community organizations? Are we communicating well with our community leaders? So these are some of the assessment questions you would get. Talking about also, is there alignment in the mission and the program goals that you have with your community? So these are the questions they ask, and it kind of makes you start to think through actions of how you can leverage your partnerships, even if you have a really strong one in your organization. And what we've found is a lot of people really love to go back and look at their partner and stakeholder analysis and kind of see who are they partnering with? Are they aligning with their mission? Could there be a way to even strengthen their partnership? And then they usually can expand, like, who else can we have a partnership? Where's our future partners to grow from there? So that's been something we've seen a lot. And we've also seen really identifying ways to engage their partners more through communication. And they'll do communication plans and do more regulative touch points. This is also going to tie into that onboarding, offboarding, contact, making sure that people within your organization have multiple people that can contact just in case someone leaves. Then you still have a good partnership with different people within your organization. And I probably, this is definitely one of those webinars you just keep hearing me talk. So we're going to go to the next one, the organizational capacity. So this is really having a way to internally think about um, your organization and how well it's operating. And this is kind of going a little touch base on that organizational sustainability thing we were talking about, but thinking at all levels. How is the program going? How is it supported? Really looking at leadership's effectiveness to see that vision of the program to other partners. A lot of times, leaders might not know the nitty-gritties of the program, so sharing that back and forth, that might be something to work on and include everyone that's working on the program to talk. We do a up, down, down, up kind of meetings a lot of times in ours just to make sure everyone knows what's going on in our programs across the board. That could be a good strategy. So things that you would find in this if you wanted to work in this area is really aligning your program's mission and goals with everyone that's at the table, that's internally and externally at every level. And identifying opportunities to share staff and other resources across departments. This has been a really big one we saw happen during COVID. We also saw, we've done some key interviews in 2008 with the recession that a lot of state health departments and local health departments share data people. They also share communication people to really help bridge out that resource. And then we do have program evaluation included in here. Sometimes it doesn't get recognized as such a good sustainability piece, but here you're just going to ask your questions of how you're really looking at the capacity of your quality program evaluation. Are you changing things? Are the reports on the short-term intermediate outcomes? Are you looking at them? Is there what you expected? And if not, things like that. So these are really good, thoughtful questions to think about how you're utilizing not only evaluation, Anything that is very evaluation based, like quarter reporting, um, the 9 step, things that don't necessarily have to be labeled evaluation to have these components. So you can also think about that if you do the assessment questions. So in the domain here, you would actually look for ensuring that program staff and anyone really working on it are able to collect and analyze any kind of data that would help do evaluation questions of improvement. It is helpful. Not a lot of people like logic models, but they don't have to be intricate. They just need to be really based on thoughtfulness of what you're thinking about and what you want to kind of, it helps drive what kind of data to collect and what outcomes to be looking for to see if your program is really doing what it said it wants to do. And we can always help on that. We love doing them. So you can always reach out to us. And then consistently actually measuring these assessments and keeping this data and information across your whole staff. And program adaptations, we saw some really interesting ones during COVID. Working with them, you see that you can actually see how you adapted. One of the programs I got to work with did some great work on finding new ways to do sensation work during COVID when you couldn't do in person and all of it was in person. So there was a lot of shift, and they were looking for ways to take on new strategies, new science, new evidence-based kind of approaches. Um, it's really helpful to be proactive in adapting to the change in the environment. That can be in the funding stream, kind of the different climates that are going on, and like I said, COVID. So when you do actions off of this one, it's kind of a fun way to look at it is not only anticipating changes, but what I've found is people can actually look back at, well, what did we do during COVID? Oh, we had to do this change. And then so looking forward, they can go, okay, well, we knew we had to move around personnel to change to do an education program. We knew we needed more online internet systems that we could do these programs with. How did we navigate that? So seeing the way you changed in the past during some of these things can help inform how to anticipate changes in the future. And I think a lot of people have been around in public health to do a lot of those changes. So it's very creative on things that can be done. Making a plan and periodically tracking that and making sure that it can be adapted at any point. Also communicating with people and keeping that a way to make changes. And this one, you probably would say, I already do this all the time. Well, this is a great place to record that you do and how it can be leveraged. That's actually some of the things we found when we were working with people at the PSAT, is that they were like, wow, we are really good at this. And actually, we can leverage this to even do better partnerships. And we can actually do this to do organizational capacity. So we saw that really helping. So a lot of people love to look at how are we communicating. These are the assessment questions, is communication strategies, how they're securing it and maintaining it. How are they getting marketed interest? This is interesting. This was a lot comes from more of a business side, is I'm seeing a lot of people that if they can get themselves known, more of a branding of who they are and what they're about for the community, people know to go to them for certain things. Like the cessation program was one of them that we had worked with. And so that really helps. It also gets the community awareness of the issues. So in this domain, you would find that there are some really good key things to leverage off the developing a communication and marketing plan. So one again that I was talking about had their community actually help them design like a logo and actually come up with what they thought conveyed a marketing plan of the sensation program that had already been in place. And then how were they going to communicate it? And they actually took a lot of things from some really good marketing stuff. Salesforce was one of them. And they leveraged this to be able to get more of their communication out to their stakeholders, their community, and internally to leadership. So they developed an internal communication plan and they got to see the really growth after that. Um, I thought that it was very effective. Strategic planning can sound very lengthy and expensive, but it can be another scalable one. It can, there are tools out there that can be done. So if you take the assessment and you find that this domain is something you want, there is free, helpful ways to go about this and not the major ones. Yes, there are some really good people out there that do them. So that is an option too. But sometimes when you see that, you're like, ah, it's going to take a long time. It's a year planning one. You can take components and do smaller versions, but it's really just this strategic planning domain is really having you address, are you future thinking? Are you looking at the long-term funding, long-term plan, long-term impact? Like, what do you want to do in that long vision you're having rather than immediate? And that can help kind of drive you forward into another level of the program that you're working with. So there's some really good key ones if you do get that too. And so that was my brief one because I know there's a lot of domains. Again, um, you can go back to those for references, and then I can also give you the PSAT information that dives into them even deeper. We wanted to just kind of walk through what it would look like to do a PSAT, just so if you ever decide to do it, you can. And so this first one is the ways we break it apart. We first just want people to understand what they're getting themselves into for looking at the PSAT. Second component is taking it. You do it online, individual. It's really nicely done through the Brown School. And then it calculates into a group one, which I'll show you in a second. And then you would go into the next stages of planning and doing an action kind of implementation plan of what you could do next. And so how we've broken it apart for people in the past, we've done what you've just done. So you've completed the first part of understanding what the components are. And then you would take the assessment. We usually um, re, uh, I usually recommend 6 to 8 people in your group to do a really thorough one, but you can, again, do this as an individual all the way to all the 30 people if you really wanted to. What it'll take is every person takes an individual one and then you'll get a group one. And then session 3 and 4 are what we're going to do in webinar 2/workshop. And we're going to go through an example of reviewing the assessment. And then from there, how do you pick your domains? And then what do you do when you pick your domains? How do you build an action plan? And then we have had people use their sustainability action plan as even in grant writing and getting funding. So it shows you're moving forward. So taking the assessment is really easy. I know it does sound like a lot of questions. There's 5 questions for 8 domains, but they all look like this. They're very nice sliding scale, 1 through 7. You can also opt out of any question. So if you're like, I don't do anything with funding, so, or I have no idea what the external, the environmental support is, you can opt out and not do it, and it will not mess up the scores or anything. So then each person who takes the assessment will get this beautiful printout, that's in the left side and no, it'll be confidential. So you're the only one that gets the individual, and then the group will get the nice sustainable one on the right with the orange as the group compiled one. And so you'll be able to go through each question with everyone in the group session. It'll give this overall score, then the individual domain scores. And then you can see like sometimes in this example, there's a large range of the domain of respondents. And actually, sometimes you would feel like, well, is that not going to even give me any input? Sometimes the larger ranges actually are the best talking points with people because what you come together and talk about, well, yeah, I felt like the funding was definitely low. But then the person that works in funding is like, well, actually, we have some really good ones already in the pipeline and we're doing really well and we're actually on this high end. So having those conversations really helps bridge people together that might not know what all is going on in those domains. So don't worry if you have a large range in these things. They're great talking points. And also don't worry where that sustainable, it's your imprint of where you feel like you're moving. So it's really just knowing where the ranking is. It's like, where's our highest and what could we leverage? And where's our lowest where we might want to work? And if it's funding and you don't feel like you can move funding, it's okay to ignore it and move on and go to another one. And so this is kind of our quick steps to when you come together to talk about things, how you could do that process. We recommend going through the kind of each of the domains and the scores and really doing what I'm saying is why people thought their funding was in trouble or why they thought it wasn't, um, how their partnerships are going and where they could strengthen it. And then you can talk about where things are surprising you and what didn't surprise. And then that helps start to get everyone thinking about where the domains are going, the high and low. Then we recommend you taking a step after you've had conversations, and it can take multiple meetings or you can take one meeting. They've been in This is the beauty of this tool is that you get to do the process any way that fits your organization. And so you can scale it. It can be one meeting, we have to get it done. Or some people like to do a 6-month process. It really depends. Then you pick your domains and you pick I would recommend 3 or 4 because you want to narrow it down to 1 or 2. And the next step, once you pick those domains, is like, okay, this is great. I want to work on these, but where do we have the best resources and potential actionable items? And then you can select it from there. And then we have a nice kind of way to work into, you don't have to use this one, but we do love it. Sort of like an implementation action plan kind of thing for sustainability. You can use this to actually do one for each of the domains. And then the beauty of it is you can always go back to the assessment in a year and see how things have moved. And we've seen many people do this. And it's been great because not only the domains that you pick usually improve, other ones are affected by it too. So, um, what we would like to just propose for you guys, if you would ever like to, is this webinar is the one to just show you how and what the PSAT was. You can come back to it. You can email us directly and we'll get you set up if you want to take the PSAT assessment. Even if you don't want to do things afterwards, we can just get you at least to that point. We can help facilitate it to help, the members that they want. We can send out the email and get it all connected, and do that part for you. So you can email us and do that. Or by next Friday, April 17th, we'll have kind of a walkthrough instructions that you can go to the Brown website and their PSAT and walk through it on your own. Then in the workshop and webinar 2, we're going to have on May 14th, we're going to do a whole mock one where we show the assessment, then we show how we would select and talk through with domains, and then go to the action plan. And then we're also going to have a workshop if anyone wants to talk through their assessment, wants to talk through how they can move into picking out domains, or they want to look at actions and talk to us that way. And then on June 11th, we're going to do a webinar 3 that really dives into this organizational sustainability and keeping the knowledge within the institution, and onboarding and offboarding. And then we have questions. So thank you so much. I know this was a lot of information, but hopefully it's useful. And we are good for any questions that you have. And I think there might be, I'm trying to get to the chat.
No questions in the chat yet,
Yeah. Yeah.
but feel free to unmute yourselves or pop one in the chat if you have questions about this part.
But please reach out if you would like to learn more or need assistance on the assessment. Again, it's free. That's the main thing.